Good morning. Well, good afternoon. I think it's about 1 o'clock. It's May 4th, 2020. And we're back with For Our People, representing Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street. We can't meet at the bookstore. We're still social distancing, but the show goes on. So For Our People, we're continuing every week, every Monday, on HakimsBookstore.com, Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram. All the books that we talk about in this episode, you can call the bookstore and order those books on from the website, from Instagram, from Facebook, or call the store at 215-474-9495, 215-474-9495. Place your order for any of these books that happen to interest you. So today's theme, I'm Andre Smith. I sometimes forget that. I'm Andre Smith. I'm your scholar in residence here at Hakim's Bookstore. I spent 15 years teaching at American Association of Law School Institutions, Widener University, Penn State, Florida International, Howard. And it's my job to bring the books and the scholarship and the scholars and the interesting and wonderfully intelligent people that I met over the course of that period and bring them to you, just like Listervelt Middleton did back in the 70s and the 80s with scholars of that time like Ivan Van Sertima, Francis Cress Welsing. Again, shout out to Tony Brown's journal. Shout out to everybody that's bringing black intelligence and scholarship to the people. I know you need something deeper than all that, than the stuff that you get on social media and what have you, right? So we're going to dive right into it. Not going to hold you too long. First, want to give some shout outs before we talk about this week's books. Again, shout out always to the healthcare workers. Shout out to all the aides and nurses and doctors taking care of my mom and my grandmother. In this time of COVID, we are particularly attuned to how this disease is affecting our elderly people. An African proverb says that a library burns to the ground every time an old person dies, right? Takes all that knowledge with you. So if we're going to talk about black history, if we're going to talk about Afrocentricity, let's start in our family. Black history starts in your family, all right? So we're going to do, also, if we're going to talk about, folks, libraries burning to the ground because when old people pass away, let's give a shout out to the drummer. Let's culturally, Tony Allen. Right, Tony Allen, not the basketball player, but Tony Allen, the drummer for Fela Kuti, right, the Nigerian singer and political activist. For those that do not know, please look him up. We got to get some. Matter of fact, next week we'll make sure we find some books. There's got to be some biography, some good books describing the life of Fela Kuti, and his life is extraordinary. This brother was so adamant about protesting oppression and corruption against the Nigerian government. They actually not just attacked him, not just jailed him, but they assassinated his mother to try to get him to stop. And he still kept on, because once they did that, there was really no holding back, because he had to do it for her. So Tony Allen, the drummer, Afrobeat is now very popular in America, and one of the founding musicians of Afrobeat was Tony Allen, the drummer for Fela Kuti. Shout out to all the DJs dropping this knowledge. Questlove, Lord Finesse, Manny Fresh. This pandemic definitely has its downsides, but one of the upsides is Jazzy Jeff on Saturdays, 3 o'clock putting it on. And Jazzy Jeff being your favorite DJ's favorite DJ. Questlove on the side, basically giving history, college level education along with his spins. And that leads us to May 9th, this week, on Friday, Philly's own Jill Scott versus Erykah Badu. Okay, we saw Babyface versus Teddy Riley. I watched the premiere versus RZA. So Jill Scott, Philly's own, versus Erykah Badu. Woo-wee! Two powerful Beautiful, beautiful black sisters and black unapologetically, right? Speaking of blackness unapologetically, sisters, the No Name Book Club. No Name Book Club has its book out for May, and No Name has selected another sister, the autobiography of Assata Shakur. Okay, let me say that again. The autobiography of Assata Shakur. So if you want to know where Tupac Shakur got his political activism from, got his strength from, learn how to meld culture with political activism, you need to check out that book, No Name Book Club's Choice of the Month for May, the autobiography of Assata Shakur. And again, hit us up at HakimsBookstore.com, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram, Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook. Call the store, 215-474-9495. We're down in West Philly. Once they open back up, we're going to be there, 210 South 52nd Street between Walnut and Chancellor. Going to do it. Another book. This is not No Name's Book Club, but Walter Mosley. You know Walter Mosley, Devil in the Blue Dress, the Easy Rawlings Mysteries, has a new book out called Trouble Is What I Do. I recently saw a meme about Walter Mosley and how his books, especially that Easy Rawlings Mysteries, they should be, after Devil in the Blue Dress, we should be on chapter 12, 8. I mean, that should have been an ongoing series. Now, when we say this, then it is incumbent upon us. There are so many outlets now. When we talk about Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media site, one of these things about these DJ battles and new media that's emerging, Swiss Beats and Timberland with this verses, there's just new opportunities. There's new ways to present product, right? And so RZA versus Premier had over 200,000 viewers. Teddy Riley versus Babyface had over 500,000 viewers, right, on Instagram. So we have to take these social media, we have to take this new media and use it to distribute the content that we want, right? The time has passed for us to keep begging Hollywood to produce stuff for us when the opportunities for our content to be produced and distributed is so much wider. So we have to take, again, this pandemic period to look around, observe the field, and make our plans for what is best. It ain't nothing but a master plan. It ain't nothing but sweat inside our hands. All right. So let's talk more specifically about what we're doing here to survive, and not just survive, but survive and thrive through this pandemic, right? Last week we talked about Hakim's Bookstore's Survive and Thrive Drive. Well, now we're going to talk about that. And again, go to Hakim's Bookstore. Go to GoFundMe.com. Go to Hakim's Bookstore, make your donation so that Hakim's Bookstore, owned by Miss Yvonne Blake, daughter of Dawood Hakim, who started Hakim's Bookstore in 1959, second oldest black bookstore in the country. Make sure it is still there, serving the community in West Philly by going to GoFundMe.com, Hakim's Bookstore. Go right there and make your donation. But we're going to, but not just Hakim is seeking to survive and thrive. All black bookstores around the country are needing, on the one hand, a little assistance. So if you have the wherewithal to support these bookstores, you need to do so, right? On the other hand, black bookstores, we need to innovate. We have to change with the times to create institutions that are durable through pandemics such as this. So we're going to expand this, right? This Hakim's Survive and Thrive Drive to a broader support black bookstores event. I mean, let's first talk about, it's not just black bookstores that are needing help, that are going to be in crisis because of the racial wealth gap. HBCUs, historically black colleges and institutions, historically black colleges and universities are in serious funding trouble, number one, and we've known that for a while. But number two, college enrollment is dropping precipitously, right? Across the board, white institutions and black institutions. The difference being, Harvard, as we've learned, or some people have learned, has an endowment or reserves of over $1 billion. University of Chicago, Stanford, etc. Those institutions have hundreds of millions of dollars in donations and endowments and grant fundings to support them through troubled times. HBCUs, let's take the top HBCUs as Howard, Hampton, Morehouse, Spelman, have pale in the resources that these larger institutions have, right? So on the one hand, black bookstores are in need of help. On the other hand, HBCUs are in need of help. So we have to look towards the future and see that it's probably going to be more efficient for black bookstores and black educational institutions to merge, right? To merge, right? That the black bookstore in black neighborhoods has to also have an online presence and not just be a place where you buy books, but those books need to facilitate learning, institutionalized learning. Whether it be, and when we do that, we can broaden it out from Afrocentric themes to African American themes, however you want to do it. Science, culture, entertainment, sports and industry, agriculture, right? But we have to recognize the wave of the future, and the wave of the future is using technology to make the delivery of education and knowledge more efficient. So on the one hand, black bookstores are in trouble. On the other hand, HBCUs are in trouble, which means in order to save both, they're going to have to merge. So let me give you some reasons. We're going, what I propose and we'll be working on is not just a means to GoFundMe on Hakim's Bookstore, but how a nonprofit institution that raises money and gives out grants to black bookstores or black HBCUs that are creating educational 21st century Afrocentric educational institutions, right? I don't care whether you call it a college, university, charter school, or whatever, but we have to create these institutions that promote, that attack the myth of black inferiority, that facilitate our combating the racial wealth gap. So this nonprofit will raise money, in my view, or in my conception, and give grants to black bookstores like Marcus Books, like Harriet's, like what's Talib? Talib has a Talib Kweli, the MC, has a black bookstore in Brooklyn. I mean, there's black bookstores all around the country, and we're going to institute a program that will provide grant funding for those that do several different things. First of all, black bookstores around the country have to modernize our content, right? A lot of us are sometimes stuck in the 80s and the 90s, right? We're still, as much as we have to push the John Henry Clark, as much as we have to push the Joseph Ben-Jochannan, the Amos Wilsons, we have to recognize those Afrocentric scholars that are in the present, right? We have to promote the Robin Walkers. We have to promote the Dr. Larry Drews, right? All the knowledge that was gathered in the 20th century, there's even more of it now. We have to corral it into new things. Michael Gomez's African Dominions, fantastic book. It has to become part of that Afrocentric Canon, right? As far as Afrocentric content, we have to also sponsor grant programs for black bookstores to support Afrocentric homeschool parents. Afrocentric homeschool parents have to be supported. They have to have places to meet. They have to have materials, educational materials that are age appropriate and level appropriate, right? So that's something huge that black bookstores can do to supplement the educational gap left by public schools, by HBCUs, etc. Right? So Afrocentric homeschooling content, gathering places. As I just mentioned, new books that are out. We also have to preserve the ancient and rare books. And guess what? The copyright's not protected, right? The copyright has expired on David Walker's appeal to the colored citizens of the world, right? So not only do we have to preserve that knowledge, not only do we have to have it available to the youth, it actually is no copyright on it, and therefore it's a way we can lower our costs, right? Where we can lower our costs. Um, we have to add value, right? So a grant, so this nonprofit, Save Our Bookstores or Save Our Black Books, will give grant programs, grants to bookstores who are looking to add value to the books themselves. We know that you can get the book on Kindle. We know that you can get the ebook, right? So the incentive to actually go out to the store and buy the physical copy, we have to add value. Now, I am one who writes in my books. I like physical books, so I need to have them. However, our younger generation is dealing with less space, right? Smaller apartments, tiny houses, right? And so all their content, much of their content is stored digitally. Now, we need to convert our stuff to that and support it, but we also have to add value to the physical books if that's what we're going to continue to sell. So number one, we know that black bookstores need to add food and beverage components, right? To be more to be accessible as a lounge, as an escape, as a quiet place to do the reading for those that may have a crowded home that where they can't concentrate, right? So healthy food, healthy beverage are ways that we can add value to the book reading process endeavor that also brings in revenue that saves the black bookstore. What other value can we add to the books themselves? How about a synopsis, right? Back in the day, we used to have Cliff's Notes, right? So Cliff's Notes does not have synopses for Afrocentric books like John Henry Clark's, like Ben Joseph Yakin's, like Sheikh Anta Diop's. So perhaps we, right, those who are the scholars in residence, those who are the owners of black bookstores, can we create those synopses for those black books, right? It would be very helpful and an add-on value that bookstores can provide. Podcasts such as this, right? So on the one hand, if we create synopses, Smitty's notes, or what have you, on the one hand, they will be very useful as a physical copy. On the other hand, use them this way, digitally, in social media, to promote the book itself, to promote the book, to promote the bookstore, right? Let's do synopses of Sheikh Anta Diop's The African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality, right? Those things are needed by our kids. They're needed by every level of homeschooling parents, and there's something that we as black bookstore owners and operators can elevate and aspire to and add value to the physical books. Something else we can do to add value is as to convert physical books into collector's items, right? Collector's items will have new covers, new illustrations that need to be independently art worthy, right? If we can make them independently artistic, right, that is a way to turn books, the physical copies, into collector's items instead of just the physical content, which again you can get from Kindle. Another value that black bookstores can add to having the physical copy is to create collections themselves, right? To create a First of all, if you're a homeowner, right, and you're trying to build your library, one thing you can do is ask the bookstore to curate it from the beginning, instead of piecemeal, one book at a time, right? Black bookstores can offer to be the curators and the builders of your actual library that you're establishing for yourself and for your children, right? So creating these collections or a sub-collection. Let's say you're interested in novels, or you're interested in computer tech, Africans in technology or sports or what have you, that black bookstores can create collections of black women authors, of African authors, all types of different genres, where we can give you a collection of 10 or 20 or 50 books, right? Depending on what level. Again, these are just ideas. These are just programs that black bookstores can implement to create greater value for their customers. And to the extent you need help, we will try to create an institution that will support black bookstores and support those institutions through grant programs and other ways to communicate with each other. Another value that we can add to black books are we can recognize that black books are often published by independent scholars, independent publishers. So having means to promote those publishers, to promote those authors between bookstores. So if an independent author comes to me in our bookstore in Philadelphia at Hakim's, 210 South 52nd Street between Walnut and Chancellor, how do we get this? If it's a very good book, what is the mechanism that we have to alert Marcus Books or the bookstores in DC or Jacksonville or Dallas or Houston or Kansas City, Missouri, right? There's got to be a mechanism for us to share this knowledge and create that type of channel. A third thing that we can do as far as a grant program is through events and marketing, right? Those type of campaigns. The marketing itself, the event itself, is not necessarily the money-making activity. The money-making activity is the selling of books. However, the activity really just needs to break even, right? If we have more activities, that brings the people into the store to support you to have to buy the black books. So number one, of course, we need more book signings. And again, we need to lean on our independent authors and publishers to do more book signings and therefore bring more customers to your store. Again, homeschool gatherings. Homeschool gatherings are absolutely essential, not just for the bookstore itself, but also for the homeschool parents who are very much in need for places to gather their children. Homeschool parents, if you don't know, often get together in groups of 5, 10, 15, 20, right? So they can pull those resources together. That collective energy needs to be supported, and we can do that at black bookstores. After the homeschool gatherings, we can also offer after-school help for those that are still in traditional public schools and private, public, charter schools. SAT and standardized prep courses, right? Those things that we need to advance and create for those students that are very serious about pursuing higher education. How do we support them? So another activity that helps our community, builds up our knowledge base, but also then brings visitors to your store for as customers. SAT standardized prep courses, right? Let's do those on the weekends, right? So in the morning, we can start with breakfast, and we can go to homeschool gathering. We can do after school help. We can do SAT prep, right? And after that, we can also allow these children to artistic programs to also present that stuff. So art and culture in the evening, whether it be poetry readings, whether it be painting, whether it be song and dance. Again, using the bookstore, using the space as activities that then draw in customers are ways in which we can create revenue. And we're going to create grant programs that can help that and save not just save black bookstores, but allow them to thrive and be pillars of the community and educational lighthouses, institutions for us. STEM and coding courses, right? To the extent our public schools are not teaching coding to our kids, we absolutely must supplement that gap by STEM and computer coding, teaching our kids about race and technology. Right? And we can do even more fun film series. Shout out to my brother Vince Williams and the Me Show mission after Oscar Me Show, where they are trying to evaluate every black movie ever made. Right? Things like that belong videos, podcasts, biographies, documentaries, those things like that. The show mission belong in black bookstores. You need to be able to find the podcast. They need to be broadcast on the video systems and what have you. They all work together. And not only that, once we do it at one bookstore, it is not that hard to simulcast them to a lot of the others. So one of the ways we can save black bookstores nationally is through collective actions. So we're going to create some type of institution, some type of nonprofit that is going to support and help save these black institutions, black bookstores. So look out for that. For right now, go to GoFundMe.com, go to type in Hakim's Bookstore, and make sure this black bookstore survives. Not just survives, but thrives. But get ready for a much larger program, because this has just highlighted, this epidemic, this pandemic has just highlighted the need for a much larger program. All right, so we've done all that, and now we're going to get to the books of the week. So when we talk about books, the initial value of this particular program is to bring black books, black scholarship to the people. So every week we give you the newest books that have been identified by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, and I bring some of the best of them to you. Books from previous weeks include that we talked about before. And again, if you want any of these books, you go to HakimsBookstore.com, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram, Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook. Call the store, 215-474-9495. Put your order in for A Black Feminist Approach for Everyone by Mina Salami, Afro-Pessimism by Frank Wilderson III. This was hot right now. The term Afro-pessimism is a hot topic within education right now. Afro-pessimism by the philosopher Frank Wilderson. Queen of the Negro Leagues, Effa Manley and the Newark Eagles. Collective Courage, a favorite of mine by Jessica Numhard Gordon. The History of Africa. Again, if we're talking about Afrocentricity, the father of Afrocentricity, at least the term, is Molefi Kete Asante, and the third edition of his History of Africa is out right now. Similarly, Michael Gomez, a University of Pennsylvania professor, has written a book called African Dominions that does a deep dive into the Arab scholars, medieval scholars' representation into West Africa. The amount of knowledge and information that's available about West Africa before European colonization is vast, and we have no excuse not to look at it ourselves. And then a favorite of mine for this modern era is Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology, The New Jim Code. If you want to know how racism is going to manifest itself, if you want to know how white supremacy is going to manifest itself in the rest of 2020s and beyond, you have to get Race After Technology, The New Jim Code by Ruha Benjamin. Last week, these were in previous weeks, and they were so hot I got to keep them in your memory. Books from last week specifically: Administrations of Lunacy, Racism and the Haunting of American Psychiatry at the Milledgeville Asylum by Mabs Seacrest. Afro-Realisms and the Romance of Race, Rethinking Blackness in the African American Novel by Melissa Daniels Roderkus. Campus Uprisings, How Student Activists and Collegiate Leaders Resist Racism and Create Hope by Tyron Douglas. Then there was Jamaica in the Age of Revolution by Trevor Bernard. Multiculturalism in Higher Education, Increasing Access and Improving Equity in the 21st Century, and that's edited by C. Spencer Platt, Adrielle Hilton, and others. And in Solidarity with Other Beings on the Planet, Alice Walker, Ecofeminism and Animals in Literature by Pamela B. June. Very interesting topic, extending the discussion of African American oppression to white supremacy towards the treatment of animals. On the one hand, you could consider it interesting. On the other hand, a lot of other people will be on guard for so-called cultural or scholarly appropriation. All right, you ready for this week's books? So on May 4th, 220, let's present 6 fantastic books that just came out that, again, were identified by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, and I think they are all worthy of your time. The first one, Convictions of Faith by R.S. Basi. Convictions of Faith by R.S. Basi. And this is wicked. This is Afrocentric book right here. R.S. Basi is also the author of The Black Hand of God. And this book is about a woman, a fantastic, a phenomenal Congolese woman named Kempa Vita. K-I-M-P-A. First name Kempa Vita. V-I-T-A. Kempa Vita. An Afrocentric account of the actual events of Kempa Vita's life chronicled by Portuguese missionaries. After declaring herself the reincarnation of Saint Anthony, Kempa Vita's influence grows until she becomes a threat to king and church. Often called the African Joan of Arc, Kempa Vita was a progenitor of the African independent church movement, which sought to reconcile African spiritual faith with the Eurocentric teachings of the Catholic Church. Her rallying cry was heard in the 1739 Stono Rebellion here in America, in South Carolina, one of the largest slave uprisings in the British colonies, giving her life a direct connection to American history. Kempa Vita. So, for those that know the story of the Nation of Islam and the appearance of Wallace Fard Muhammad to Elijah Muhammad and whatnot, and them creating basically a religion that combined the experience of African Americans with that of Islam into something new and useful, Kempa Vita did the very same thing by taking African religion that she was familiar with and also the Catholic religion that was being imposed on them by the Portuguese and redeveloped it into something that served her and her people revolutionary wise. So a fantastic book called Convictions of Faith by R.S. Basi. This is wonderful, wonderful stuff. Kempa Vita. Even if you don't buy the book, you got to look up that name, Kempa Vita. So I'm gonna, in matter of fact, I'm going to follow that up with a book that has a similar theme. I'm going a little bit out of order, but the theme is so similar that they definitely need to go together. Theologizing, excuse me, y'all. Theologizing in Black. On Africana Theological Ethics and Anthropology by Seleucian L. Joseph. Let me just, this goes out, shout out to Doctors Courtney Bryan, I see you Courtney, Dr. Timothy Golden, Marshall Mitchell, Sidney Williams. You guys will be very, very interested in this book right here. Let me just read a blurb about the description. Theologizing in Black is a creative and rigorous comparative study on Black theological musings and liberative intellectual contemplations engaging the theological ethics and anthropology of both continental African theologians, from Tanzania, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Black theologians in the African diaspora, including Haiti, Trinidad, Jamaica, Antigua, Barbuda, and the U.S. Using the pluralist approach to religion promoted by the philosopher of religion and theologian John Hick, the book is also an attempt to bridge an important gap in the comparative study of religion, African studies and liberation theology, both in Africa and its diaspora. The book provides an analytical framework and intellectual critique of white Christian theologians who deliberately disengage with and exclude Black and African theologians in their theological writings and conversations. From this vantage point, African critical theology is said to be a theology of contestation as it seeks to deconstruct white supremacy in the theological enterprise. Say that 5 times. This book not only articulates a rhetoric of protest about the misrepresentation and underrepresentation of the humanity of African and Black people and white theological imagination, it also enunciates a positive image of Black humanity and congruently promulgates a constructive representation of Black women. In other words, you know what I say, it attacks the myth of Black inferiority. The most debilitating aspect of the racial wealth gap of white supremacy is the myth of Black inferiority, and this is designed to hit it head on. Finally, the paramount goal of Africana theological anthropology and ethics is the preservation of life and promotion of human dignity and the sheer acknowledgement that the African people and people of African descent are bearers of the image of God. All right, I can't say it no better than that. All right, so that is on one hand Convictions of Faith by R.S. Basi, and then secondly Theologizing in Black on Africana Theological Ethics and Anthropology by Seleucian Joseph. Interesting stuff. I gotta save the Darity for last. William Darity's got a new book. I gotta save that one for last. So third, let's do Legislating Gender and Sexuality in Africa, since we're talking about theology in Africa, Kempa Vita in Africa. Let's follow that up with Legislating Gender and Sexuality in Africa, Human Rights, Society, and the State, edited by Lydia Boyd. I believe she's out of the University of North Carolina. Broad in geographic coverage and topical in scope, chapters investigate such subjects as marriage legislation in Mali, family violence experienced by West African refugees, sex education in Uganda, and statutes criminalizing homosexuality in Senegal. These case studies highlight the nuances and contradictions in the varied ways key actors make arguments for or against rights. They also explore how individual countries draft and implement laws that attempt to address the underlying problems. Again, as a legal scholar and one that is writing a book called AfrolanticanJurisprudence, I'm very much interested in the law and culture in Africa. Legislating Gender and Sexuality in Africa details how legal efforts in the continent can often be moralizing enterprises, illuminating how these processes are closely tied to notions of ethics, personhood, and citizenship. Interesting book. Fourth on the list, let's do The Buck, the Black, and the Existential Hero. Let me say that again. The Buck, the Black, and the Existential Hero, Refiguring the Black Male Literary Canon, 1850 to present, by James B. Haile. The Buck, the Black, and the Existential Hero combines philosophy, literary theory, and jazz studies. Jazz studies with Africana studies to develop a theory of the black male literary imagination. In doing so, it seeks to answer fundamental aesthetic and existential questions. How does the experience of being black and male in the modern West affect the telling of a narrative, the shape or structure of the novel, the development of characters and plot lines, and the nature of criticism itself? James Haile is a philosopher and professor of literature at the University of Rhode Island, so big ups to him for his book. Again, this is another phenomenal book. I wish I had enough money to buy all these books. Look, hey, if some of these publishers want to send me some review copies, I totally invite that. The Content of Our Caricature, African American Comic Art and Political Belonging, by Rebecca Wanzo of NYU Press. The Content of Our Caricature urges readers to recognize how the wide circulation of comic and cartoon art contributes to a common language of both national belonging and exclusion in the U.S., trying to play in both sides of the fence. Historically, white artists have rendered white caricatures as virtuous representations of American identity, while their caricatures of African Americans are excluded from these kinds of idealized discourses. Again, the myth of black inferiority. It's all, call it a lot of different things. Employing a rich illustration program of color and black and white reproductions, Wanzo explores the works of artists such as Sam Alai, Larry Fuller, Richard Grass Green, Brumzik Brandon Jr., Jennifer Crute, Aaron Magruder, which you know, Kyle Baker, Ollie Harrington, and George Harriman, all of whom negotiate and navigate this troublesome history of caricature in comic books, comic art, and whatnot, cartoons and such. Very interesting book, especially for our children and our teenagers and college students that are very artistically inclined. That does not include me, but I still am very interested in nonetheless. And shout out to all of my people at the University of Maryland who remember when Aaron Magruder was writing the Boondocks for the Black Explosion magazine, and then the Diamondback, which we call the Devilback. All right. So the last book comes from the powerhouse scholar William Darity, and if you know me, I'm sure I've mentioned him here, and I believe he is the foremost black economist in the United States of America today. The papers he's written, especially particularly one he's written with Derek Hamilton, published with the St. Louis Fed in 2019, is in my view one of the strongest attacks against the myth of black inferiority that I've ever read, right? So William Darity is one badass, and he has a new book out here about reparations. And I know that's on a lot of you guys' minds. From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century by William A. Darity and A. Kristen Mullen, published by the University of North Carolina Press. So a little blurb from the book, or at least the description of the book. Racism and discrimination have choked economic opportunity for African Americans at nearly every turn. At several historical moments, the trajectory of racial inequality could have been altered dramatically. Perhaps no moment was more opportune than the early days of Reconstruction, when the U.S. government temporarily implemented a major redistribution of land from former slaveholders to the newly emancipated enslaved. But neither Reconstruction nor the New Deal nor the Civil Rights struggle led to an economically just and fair nation. Today, systematic inequality persists in the form of housing discrimination, unequal education, police brutality, mass incarceration, employment discrimination, and massive wealth and opportunity gaps. Economic data indicates that for every dollar the average white household holds in wealth, the average black household possesses a mere 10 cents. Let me say that one more time. Economic data indicates that for every dollar the average white household holds in the wealth, the average black household possesses a mere 10 cents, 10%, right? From here to equality, William Darity Jr. and A. Kristen Mullen confront these injustices head on and make the most comprehensive case to date for economic reparations for U.S. descendants of slavery. After opening the book with a stark assessment of the intergenerational effects of white supremacy on black economic well-being, Darity and Mullen look to both the past and the present to measure the inequalities born of slavery. Now, I am an economic justice scholar. I agree with this wholeheartedly. I am very interested in the detailing of the value, or as it said, to measure the inequalities born of slavery. I've actually written a paper with Carlton Waterhouse on taxation in slavery, how the tax code would be applied to reparations if we ever get it. That said, I do not believe for one moment of one day in my life that white folks in America are going to pass legislation that will grant reparations to black people. The case is just. The case is clear. It has ample evidential and historical support. However, money gets money. Wealth gets wealth. Capital gets capital. And without the capital to force, without the capital to negotiate for reparations, asking for it, providing a moral case for it will not suffice. And that is the central learning of Derek Bell's interest convergence theory, which to me is probably the most accurate and durable construct within all of critical race theory. So, William Darity has a great book out. It will be on my shelf, but I have to give you my little knock on the idea that we are, in fact, going to get reparations. And it is more efficient. Again, when we talk about economics, we're talking about the efficient use of resources, including your time, including your energy, and including your brain power. To me, it is much more fruitful and productive and therefore relatively efficient to spend our time better educating ourselves and our children, to start and patronize black businesses and institutions, and to stop unduly criticizing each other and promoting that myth of black inferiority. That is the way we can amass human, social, political, and financial capital. That is the revolution that will never be televised. So once again, this is for our people. Every Monday, Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street between Walnut and Chancellor. Meet us there after the pandemic. But while we're all in quarantine, while we're on lockdown, give us a call, 215-474-9495. Order some of the books that we just talked about today. Visit us on the website, HakimsBookstore.com, Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram. Going to see you next week on For Our People. This is Smitty Bonton. Hope that.